Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Saga. I am David Cottingham. We're with Hannah Burr. How are you, Hannah?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very good. Welcome back, everyone, as we dive into all the biggest stories outside of the Skywalker saga. And I'm thrilled to start. You know, we've had some pretty good success, I feel like, talking about the Vader comic series, but we're going to take a little break from that because some major events have been happening with the Mandalorian, right?
Yes.
So what big name got dropped, Hannah, that we're going to talk about today?
Thrawn, Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yes, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So we are going to talk about his book, simply titled Thrawn, written by the great Timothy Zahn, who, if I think most Star Wars fans, if not all Star Wars fans, know this, he actually introduced the character to the Star Wars fandom back in 1991 when he wrote Heir to the Empire, which took place 5 years, which is funny because that's what The Mandalorian takes place, right? 5 years after Return of the Jedi. But those three books, unfortunately, are no longer canon. So it was, I don't know, I was thrilled to know that Zahn, I remember I was at a Star Wars celebration when it was announced that Timothy Zahn will be rewriting a new trilogy that is canon. So this book dropped April of 2017. If you haven't gone out and gotten it, I think we both at the end of this will highly recommend it. But obviously with all of these episodes that we do, we're not going to spoil anything. We're just going to dive into some of the characters, a little bit of the overall impact that it has on the Star Wars universe. So first up, Hannah, let's talk about Thrawn himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is a blue skin Chiss is what they call him, right? Now, I think the interesting thing that we kind of talked about off air is this idea of a Chiss's ability, which kind of lends itself to why he's such a good strategist. So, what is that?
So it is related to the Force, but it's something that the Chiss call third sight. Now, third sight is normally seen. Actually, it's not even normally. It's mostly seen in young women, and as soon as they mature, they are taken to help the Chiss with their war plans, with their planning, with all of that. Because what the third sight is, it's you get premonitions, you see into the future. So they honed this talent of young women, which gets more involved in the second book in the Thrawn trilogy series. But it is heavily hinted time and time again that Thrawn also has third sight. It is rare for a male Chiss to have this ability, but I honestly can't see any other, unless he's super lucky and just, has a really good gut feeling. There's no way he is able to manipulate and to be one step ahead of everyone and rise in the ranks as he did and not have third sight.
Yeah. Right.
So that's the skill he has, or it's never explicitly said. At least I don't think it is, but it's definitely hinted that he has third sight.
Yeah, I think it is. I think because, and just to kind of paint an overall picture of it, it's similar. It's actually similar to Jedi and dark side users when they have premonitions. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's the absolute outcome, but it is an outcome and one you plan for, right? It's very similar to the Emperor, right? In Return of the Jedi, he foresaw that all these things were going to happen. Well, there's a couple of things that happened that changed the outcome, right? So it's very similar, I think, to what we're talking about here is, as you follow Thrawn's story and and his character, he knows. Even though he doesn't have he doesn't have third sight. I always compare him to Batman because Batman is right, the master strategist, right? He knows what you're going to do before you know what you're going to do, and that's what Thrawn does. He just knows what you're going to do, so he plans for it, and he has a backup plan, and a backup plan to that. So that's what it seems. That's why he's, like you said, that's why he was able to rise through the ranks so quickly. And that's what we get in this book. This book is his origin as far as with the Empire. Now, he has a bigger origin with the Chiss ascendancy. And I think, and I haven't gotten into that next trilogy yet, but I think that's what we're going to learn from that trilogy, right?
I hope so.
But this one here is more centered on his introduction into the Empire, his experience growing in those ranks, and ultimately what leads him to what his canon appearance was in the third season of Star Wars Rebels. So let's talk about a couple of the other kind of main characters that pop up in this. Who is Eli Vanto? Because he's a big name now, I think, in this story.
He absolutely is. So Eli Vanto essentially was brought in to be the translator for Thrawn. But he honestly, I think the only way you can describe his relationship with Thrawn or what it grows into is they're best friends.
Right.
Eli he doesn't know why, but he just decides to be loyal to Thrawn. He just has a feeling about him. He likes the point of view. He feels a little weird about the politics going on. And Thrawn essentially becomes his mentor, which is really weird because Eli is supposed to be his mentor.
Right.
It's a weird thing there, but I think that's the best way to describe their friendship. And it's because of Thrawn that Eli becomes successful without giving too much away.
Yeah, and like anybody that gets assigned to a job that you really don't want to do, he did fight it a little bit and was very upset that he had to do this because it kept him from achieving some of the things he wanted to achieve, not knowing that this was kind of a better path, right? So I actually, again, probably we should mention this. I'm pretty sure you read this, right? I listened to this book. Okay. Yeah. So Vanto in the audiobook, doing the audiobook with hearing his, having the narrator read his lines a certain way. I mean, you heard the contempt a little bit sometimes in his voice, and you heard kind of the regret almost that he's helping, but then you do ultimately start feeling like he's understanding what Thrawn's trying to do, right? Because again, Thrawn has a plan always. Another character that gets introduced here that ultimately is connected to Rebels as well. We get the story of Governor Arinda Price, which I was a little surprised about. I didn't realize we were going to get that much of a backstory with her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think? Yeah, what do you think about her storyline in there?
I think she was very interesting, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, anybody who's in the political hierarchy in the Empire is manipulative. You have to be to survive. So I liked her, but I didn't like her. She was very manipulative, but and I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
But she sort of does a flip, and Thrawn's reaction is very much the reaction you would predict it to be.
Right.
I hope I'm being vague enough. But it makes you go, wow, she is a true politician. And really just trying to survive. It makes you, I think the whole point of her story is to help the reader realize that all anybody who joins the Empire wants to do is survive. They want to be the best. They want to survive. They want to rise above everyone. And so they'll be willing to flip-flop and abandon ship and jump on the bandwagon at any point without a plan. And I think that's a really powerful comparison to Thrawn, who just has one main course. He never deviates.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are points in the book where you're like, why didn't you do that, Thrawn? And then later you go, oh, that's why you didn't jump on that bandwagon. Yeah. So I feel like her backstory in this book is more of a establishment of comparison between the two different types of people in the Empire and how the majority is just trying to stay alive while Thrawn just isn't. He's like, this is my path. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's good. That's interesting you say that, because I remember the episodes with Price in Star Wars Rebels. It's not that I didn't. It's not that I hated her. It's just I did hate her character at times, because she is very evil and very manipulative, and you see where that comes from a lot in this book. And she is very much what you see in Rebels. And she comes from a mining family, right? I think she basically cons her way out of that into politics. And I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on there. And it's good because, again, you get in this book, you get the military side, but you also get the political side of what's going on in the Empire as well. Now the book covers several years. It doesn't really get specific, but it does lead close to Rebels, which is about 5 years before New Hope, is where we kind of end it. But I think if I remember correctly, it covers maybe 6 or 7 years worth of Thrawn's rise in the ranks, which, because again, he rises a lot quicker than most, just because he's in situations where he just makes the right decisions, right? Now, I love the scenes with the Emperor. He has notable ones, definitely in the beginning, and then definitely at the end of this book. Because we were talking about, it's funny because you were looking at his full name, right? And you weren't sure exactly how it's pronounced. I only know because I heard it in the audiobook, Mithron Urodo. And I love how the Emperor says it. Like, if you listen to the audiobook and the way the Emperor says Mithron Urodo, I mean, it's so good. So they had some great conversations, but I guess one of the most notable ones, most notable characters, is Vader, that pops up as well. So now we will go through this trilogy, which the next book has a lot more Vader in it.
Yes.
But I did want to talk about a little bit, because we were talking about whether or not, because he met Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think the first conversation he has with the Emperor, he asks about Anakin. And
I think so. Yeah,
because the Emperor lets him know that, sorry, but he died during the Clone Wars.
Right.
And it's under our suspicion that does he actually know that Vader is Anakin?
Oh, he knows.
You think he knows?
Oh, he knows. Like, he's too smart not to know.
Yeah.
And don't necessarily want to give too much away about the next book, but there are other things that make you go, especially like specific examples that make you go, oh, he totally knows. Mm-hmm. He totally knows. And he already knows. We can say this because, Obi-Wan brought this whole thing into it. He understands that you can die, or a part of you can die, and then there's another part that takes over.
Yeah.
You have an identity go away and a new identity comes on. So he already understands that concept. So I don't think it's that far of a leap for him to go, oh, Anakin's dead, but Darth Vader lives.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yes. So the next book, which is Thrawn Alliance, is there's a lot more in that conversation, which we'll dive into. Yeah. So we usually start off with this. So, but we actually started off with more of the characters. So we'll get close to ending this with overall thoughts of the book, Hannah, because I know there are 3 books in this series. This is the first book. But what were your? I mean, what were your? If you liked it, what would you like most about it, and what points really kind of stood out to you that drew you in?
Honestly, for me, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think for me, the most enjoyable part was reading the result or reading a choice Thrawn make and go, that makes no sense. Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. And then you see it succeed. Or you see something go wrong, but then he just... It's almost as if it was a part of his original plan and he naturally adapts to it and he still comes out on top. And you just sit there and go, how? How is that even possible? And I think it just... I don't know. For me, it made me realize that there were definitely powerful people in the Empire outside of Darth Sidious and Darth Vader.
Yep.
So I think for me, it was just enjoyable to see a perspective of someone manipulating, seeing how it was done, and also just getting an inside look in how the Empire's politics and military... There really isn't a difference, in my opinion. Yeah. It's a dog-eat-dog world. So those were my favorite parts of the book. I thought it was very enjoyable. And Thrawn is just such an interesting character.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. I agree with you. I think the book, for one, a very easy listen, is well written. I didn't feel like there were a lot of points that just dragged out. It kept you engaged through the whole, and it's a pretty thick book too. It's a pretty thick book. I think it's like 14, 15 hours of audio. So I think the most notable thing for me as you learn about Thrawn, because again, I don't have that much memory of the EU Thrawn from the original books. It's been so long since I read those. But the Thrawn that I know now, which is in this book, in this trilogy, he's I don't feel like he's evil in a sense. I feel like he's, when he joins the Empire, his whole point was he wanted to make sure that the Empire wasn't a threat to the Chiss ascendancy, right? And he kind of made that deal with the emperor that I will serve you if you protect my people. And as serving him, of course, he knows that the Empire is the ruling class of the galaxy. So naturally, he's going to be part of what's ruling, and he just makes the best of it. And it's not that he is rolling heads like some of these guys like Tarkin or Tag or Mahdi or any of these guys, or Krennic or something like that, right? He's just doing his job, and he's doing his job better than anybody. And I think he is a very interesting character. He's a very interesting character because I think if the Republic was the governing body, he would work for the Republic, knowing that they would protect, and he would still engage in that type of thought process. And so he becomes a very interesting character, and so much so that it's very interesting if he comes in live action, and that's a whole other story we get into later. But so overall, though, Hannah, because this was I think this was a bold move by Lucasfilm reintroducing this character.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So how impactful was his reintroduction, knowing that, because it's funny that in the original Thrawn trilogy, it was after Return of the Jedi. So we had no other, movies or TV shows or anything, right? You could kind of write what you want and it's great.
Yeah.
But he's reintroduced now before the original trilogy. And since he never shows up in the original trilogy, and we know why, because of Rebels, but how, I don't know, how bold, how risky do you felt that move was doing that at that time period?
I honestly don't think it's risky in the sense that you're mentioning a character. If you're a huge, not even if you're a huge Star Wars fan, if you've read Thrawn or if you've watched Rebels, you immediately know who that is and you go, holy smokes. Because my first thought was, how is he still alive? That was my first thought, is how is he still alive? And then the news came out confirming that this takes place before the epilogue.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well then that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was necessarily of a risk. I just think it's more of this weaving. We're starting to see almost this Avengers effect where we see everything intersecting with each other and stories being, mapped off in different ways. So I don't think it's that much of a risk, but I definitely didn't see it coming.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think I thought if we ever were going to get a Thrawn, I did think it was going to be maybe even further past all of these movies, and I thought it was going to be somewhere in some other time period. But to have him still come back as a canon character with the Empire in this time period, and I feel like they did a good job of putting him in the right spot, and I think there's going to be more coming from him, not just in the novels but in other mediums, because I don't think he's it's funny because I don't think he's a hugely popular character. I think he's a known character, but I don't know if a lot of people really care that much about him yet. But I think they will. I think they will. Right?
They absolutely
and that's what you have with these books now. You have a foundation of a backstory, and if you don't get to it yet, you will get to it. Very similar to what I'm reading now with the appearance of Ahsoka. The Disney Disney Plus and the Clone Wars episodes are getting watched like crazy now because people need to know her backstory. They haven't seen her backstory, and now they can go back and watch her backstory. So I think this is going to kind of serve the same purpose for Thrawn as we start getting him maybe in live action or more animated series. They're going to have to go back and read these books and really find out and get into his head how that all came about. So I recommend the book. Hannah, what about you?
Absolutely.
I don't know if I don't know if the last couple episodes we forgot to rate.
Did
we forget to rate?
Okay.
I don't think we did. So Thrawn, we do out of 5, I think, right?
Out of 5.
Yeah. What do you give this one?
I would give this one a 4 out of 5. Just because, as you mentioned earlier, it was a easy listen for you. It is a very easy read. Nothing seems dragging, and frankly, with the reading, you completely forget that this guy is with the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where you read like Empire and you go, "Oh, that's right," because you're right. He's not necessarily a bad person. He's just like everybody else trying to survive, but he's doing it in a more tactful way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, it's almost contrasting to how he appears in Rebels, because in Rebels, you're like, oh, he's a bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you read the books and you're like, He's not bad.
No, he's just doing his job, right?
Doing
and
his job.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention before I give my rating, and it really helps when you're listening to it. Most of the book is actually narrated by him, because he's telling you what he's basically saying, describing how the person's feeling, what his mannerisms.
Weird.
It is weird, right? He's basically telling you how the person's feeling, because he knows how the person's feeling based on his ability. And it's so cool because because you hear his voice, the voice in his mind as you're doing the audiobook. And the guy, Mark Thompson, who narrates it, he sounds exactly like the Rebels show. So it is Thrawn's voice, and it's crazy. It's so good. I'm with you. I give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's a great book. Zahn is a great writer. It's definitely worth picking up, and I was very happy to dive into that right away, and I couldn't stop. I mean, I listened to it in a matter of a week. I think it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's our rating. That's our discussion on Thrawn. We've got 2 more books to go through as well. So come back for our next episode, which probably won't be either of these because we got something else to talk about. But we will continue Vader, we will continue Thrawn, and then we will obviously keep continuing on other stories that pop up, especially during the current time of Star Wars, if it's a story that is worth talking about. But all these good stories, we're going to continue on beyond the saga. So thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Again, go to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button to get some more of these videos. Take care. Have a great week. May the Force be with you.